Hi, you guys. This is Dr. Cunningham. I decided to join social media again to share my thoughts about a very specific topic. Our culture today is very much so about ghosting people and cancel culture, especially if someone does something we don't like the first time. And I feel like I think we are in a culture where people are a lot less forgiving and have deterred from the art of reconciling, the art of having fair disagreements and discussions leading to resolve. So today I wanted to assist with, hopefully, a conversation that I think is necessary, which is how do we delineate between a situation or relationship that is harmful, even if it's not as overt as physical aggression, and a relationship that is worth reconciling. Well, I can think of two major, I would say, considerations with regards to psychology. Narcissists, which is something that can be diagnosed according to the DSM, and then psychopathic traits. So there's narcissistic traits and psychopathic traits. Psychopathic traits is not directly within the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5TR, which is the most recent one. However, antisocial personality disorder is. And so, let me clearly define, and I'm also going to include short definitions within the description of this video. But a narcissist with particular narcissistic traits, and I'll share some of the traits specific to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and from now on will be considered the DSM 5TR, just to make it easier to say, because it's a very long title for essentially the list of psychiatric and psychological disorders that are diagnosable within the field of mental health. But someone who is a narcissist or has narcissistic traits has a very grandiose sense of self. They usually are low with consideration of empathy, and they require admiration. Now, a narcissist can also be very charismatic, know how to work a room, know how to connect with people, and some people in short spans of time connecting with them can like them a lot, actually. So just want to make sure I say that. But their empathy and their sense of self is focused on them. So they, generally speaking, will make choices that only consider them and what will benefit them. The narcissist. Now, someone who is psychopathic is a person that also has very low sense of empathy, scarce with regards to emotional expression and actual internally experiencing emotions, especially remorse and guilt, because they will not consider a person's humanity or even the life of animals, because that's one of the traits is they could potentially harm an animal as children. But they don't really have a sense of empathy or feel a sense of remorse or guilt after they do something to harm another person, whether it's physically or psychologically and emotionally. And they usually are in isolation. That's the reason why, again, it's a part of the antisocial personality disorder traits. Now, both of these people are charismatic. Both of these people, as far as these traits, are seen in people who are in relationships. At the same time, there's potential for harm, whether it's physical and or psychological and emotional. And I'm saying that all of this to say is that if someone is in a relationship with someone who is truly a narcissist or a psychopath, Doesn't necessarily mean that the person will automatically harm you physically. But at the same time, I can understand why you wouldn't want to be in a relationship with them if they're expressing manipulative behavior, only thinking about themselves, only wanting to do what will better their life, or thinking about themselves, or only considering how something affects them, and always wanting you to focus on them and to praise them and to make them feel great about themselves. Which is different than if someone is in a relationship with a person whom you've had a misunderstanding and a disagreement about what occurred between the two of you. Now, due to the 20 plus years of clinical treatment that I provided to people in relationships, whether again they're friendships, whether it's family and or romantic relationships, there were times when people are responding, especially those whom are the person who feels like they are the victim of what's happening from the other person, or the person who is considered the possible psychopath or narcissist, has their own trauma that they're dealing with. And then that can traumatize the person who's in the relationship, who possibly hasn't dealt with someone who was low in empathy, high in self-regard only, and not considering how they affect the other person. Now, when leaving that relationship, dealing with relational trauma can also affect the person's lens. So if you have been in a relationship and you've dealt with trauma, whether it's due to something physical or psychological and emotional through manipulation, then I always will say, go to therapy. Why? Because if you are still unhealed from what happened in your previous relationship, it can actually affect your perspective or your perception of a new person in your life who you just had an interaction with that probably warrants discussion and clarification, rather than assuming that you're dealing with someone whom you cannot reconcile with, whom you cannot reason with. Because the people you can't reconcile or reason with are the people who don't feel remorse, who don't feel guilt, who don't have empathy toward other people. But even those that are psychopathic, again, may have a sense of what is appropriate pro-social behavior, so they can respond in a certain way. Because usually, again, when you think about psychopaths, and especially serial killers, they were known for kind of like people under the radar, really respected, like, within their own households, considered very nice people. Like, they would never, a person that they would never guess would do anything violent. It's a very specific behavior. And usually something, again, that's like a psychopathic tendencies or traits or behaviors are associated with nurture and nature. So there's genetics and also environmental factors that lead to it. Narcissists usually environmental, but I also err on the side of genetics as well. So, literally with consideration of working with those populations previously. But what I will say is can we really delineate between what is a maladaptive pattern and what is something that's potentially untreatable, that really is a deep-rooted psychiatric disorder that can lend toward being in a relationship with someone that potentially there aren't any possibility for change. Do you understand what I mean? So when working with people, or when in a relationship with people, ask them about what's going on. Notice if they actually feel remorse and if they feel guilty about what happened or what they did or how they made the other person feel. Do they even consider how you feel when they did what they did or when they said what they said? But when you have those conversations, make sure that they're face-to-face conversations or over the phone. Like, I know we're in a day and age where technology is major, but I still don't understand how people can start a relationship or end a relationship or break up in a relationship through a text message, through social media. That's so out of touch with humanity. And so my hope is that people really will start thinking about what it means to have conversations that might be uncomfortable and difficult conversations, not for the sake of an argument, but for the sake of resolve and reconciling when appropriate. Or even if you're going to break up, to break up in a way that is with consideration of a resolve, and not just dropping people, not just ghosting people because you feel like you don't want to waste your time, because how you start a relationship, how you end a relationship really does show or reflect how you are within a relationship and the respect you have for yourself as well as for other people. And who's to say, even if people break up, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for people to be friends. But even if you decide you're not going to be friends after breaking up from a romantic relationship, then it's respectful when it's a mutual decision, or at least a decision that was discussed with the other person and not something that they have to find out through your lack of response. Again, if it's a dangerous situation, I understand, preserving your own well-being, your own physical, emotional, and psychological wellness. I understand that. But at the same time, if it's a non-violent situation, if it's not an extremely manipulative or unimaginably difficult situation where you're unable to resolve, then give them a chance. Listen to what they have to say. Consider what they are sharing with you as far as their heart, their thoughts, their own emotions, how they perceive you, and then you can share how you perceive them. But meet with a therapist as well, and don't wait until it gets so bad until breaking up is like the only option. I always tell people it's like when you first start having a disagreement, that's the time to schedule if you feel as though you're unable to resolve the first disagreement. Because usually the first disagreement in a relationship continues on for years. Can I tell you, there were times I've worked with people, like just relationships, whether it's family or romantic situations, where they were arguing about the same situation for years. They forgot exactly how it started and when, unless there's that one person that knows all the details and never forgets a story. Like, because I know those people too. Like, no, I remember 1956 and August the 3rd at 2:35 p.m. Like, really, Al? You remember all the details? But what I'm saying, though, is, it's a very important relational skill to know what it's like to forgive, to reconcile, to create a new agreement, even if that means redefining the relationship. Meet with a counselor who is a neutral party who could moderate the situation, to referee the situation, if you will, just to make sure that you all are able to get to a resolve if you feel as though you're unable to on your own. But to just ghost people and to cancel them just because you feel like you don't want to have to deal is saying a lot about you and not necessarily about the other person. Okay? My thoughts. Have an excellent day, y'all.